a descendant of the kingdom of the Happy Land hailing in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and above all, a black woman hailing from the great state of North Carolina. All right, so I'll pass it over to my co-moderator.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Devontae Wilson. I hail from the Piney Woods of Eastwood, North Carolina. I currently serve as the 75th president of the Young Democrats of North Carolina. We are the founding state of the Young Democrats of America. And I also have the wonderful opportunity of serving as a middle school educator. Shout out to Southern Middle, home of the Dragons. I'm so thankful to be here. And Senator Harris, we just want to kick off for you for opening remarks.
Thank you, thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for your leadership, for your friendship, and for your time. To the White family, thank you for hosting us. This historic, this legendary business that you have been running as a family for 53 years. We spoke earlier, and this is just true of so many of our businesses, but in particular this business, which is that our business leaders are leaders in business, but they're so much more than that. They're civic leaders, community leaders, role models, the people who nurture and who take care of the community and create a warm and safe place for folks to go. And there's nothing like going to the barbershop to know what's really happening. I always say to my team, okay, that's fine. You can talk about polls, you can talk about this, and you can talk about that. What are folks in the barbershop talking about? Because that's about real talk. So I want to thank you all for the honor of having us here today on behalf of myself and Joe Biden. GK, did he leave already? And Alma Adams, I want to thank the two incredible, not only North Carolinian leaders, but United States leaders.
Yes, yes.
We serve together in the United States Congress. We are all members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and each of them are powerful, powerful voices, not only for the people of North Carolina, but for all people in our country. So I want to, in their absence, thank them. They greeted me earlier. Councilman Corey Branch, I want to thank, there you are, thank you for your leadership, and so many others. So listen, I wanted to be here in Raleigh in North Carolina as one of the first trips that I've taken, now officially on the ticket as a vice presidential nominee, because one, I love North Carolina, and it's so great to come back. But two, there is so much about what happens in North Carolina as a bellwether, as a measure for what's going on in our country, both in terms of its historical strengths, but also in terms of the challenges. The other thing we know about North Carolina is this. North Carolina is a road to the White House. There is no question about that. North Carolina is a road to reaching a majority in the United States Senate, where I now serve. There's no question about that. And so it is you, the leaders of North Carolina, that are going to make a difference and make a decision that is not only about the people of this state, but the people of our nation. Because with you, when you walk into that ballot box or drop that ballot in that box or walk into the polling station, with you, you will carry the future of so many others. So I wanted to come here to pay my respects, but also to thank you and to listen to you and to talk with you, because we are all in this together. We have 36 days to get it done. Early voting in North Carolina starts on Thursday, October 15th, so there's not a minute to waste. And with that, let's get started with our conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you again, Senator Harris. We love having you in North Carolina.
Thank you.
So welcome to Sister Meets Talk Shop, where we are engaging African Americans under 40 in critical conversations about the future of our communities. So for the first question up today, I'd like to welcome John Verdejo for his first question, Senator Harris, for this brief Q&A.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you for coming to North Carolina. It's an honor for you to be here. Thank you. My question to you is this. Speaking as an Afro-Latino, a Black Latino, of Puerto Rican descent, Latinos have been constantly overlooked until election season. How will the Biden-Harris administration ensure that all are included, especially the Black and Brown community?
That's a wonderful question, and it really does highlight what's at stake in the outcome of this election in so many ways. So let's start with, one of the crises that we're facing as a country, which is the COVID pandemic I think of it both as a crisis that is about a public health crisis. I think of it as an economic crisis. And in many ways, it is about the crisis of long-standing disparities in our country that have been only exacerbated, only highlighted, which speaks to the crisis of systemic racism in our country. So, on your point, right now we are looking at the fact that Black folks and Latinos are 3 times as likely to contract this virus, and equally 3 times as likely and twice as likely to die from it. And when we look at those disparities, we know that it's connected with the fact that there's a reflection between those numbers and the pre-existing conditions that existed before the virus hit. This virus is a predator in many ways. It preys on people who have pre-existing conditions. So when you look at the Latino community, when you look at the Black community, and you know that similar in many cases in terms of the pre-existing conditions, things like high blood pressure, things like diabetes are real. And so part of the perspective that Joe and I share is one to acknowledge those racial disparities and then address them. And that's about a plan that we have, for example. By the way, Donald Trump has no plan. Let's just start there. So it's not even like we're contrasting plans. He actually does not have a plan. But our plan, which includes what we need to do around testing, around treatment, and I pray every night that we get a vaccine as soon as possible that is safe, and about distribution of that vaccine. It's about addressing the fact that we need to grow what Barack Obama and Joe Biden created with the Affordable Care Act, and we need to expand it so even more people have coverage, that we need to deal with the expansion in a way that we are dealing not only with the health care from the neck down, but let us also realize we need to also expand health care from the neck up. That's called mental health care, which particularly is an issue for us in our Latino and our Black communities, especially when you look at the high rates of undiagnosed and untreated trauma. Right? I mean, think about it for a moment. Just step back on that point. Poverty is trauma-inducing. We need to diagnose and we need to treat it. It is trauma-inducing that you experience all of the effects of poverty, including violence in communities. All of these things must be addressed and done in a manner that is conscious of the disparities based on race, based on historical disproportionate distribution of resources. One of the biggest issues that we face, again, in terms of disparities, I can go into the history. North Carolina knows it better than most. But one of the issues is what is a challenge in terms of access to capital. So the whites, I'm sure they have long stories about what they did to be smart around acquiring capital to build up your business, knowing that a lot of the traditional sources of access to capital were unavailable to Black, and still are unavailable to Black and brown communities. So Joe Biden and I have a plan that is about $150 billion that is going to be focused on low interest loans and access to capital with an emphasis on Black and brown communities, knowing that our businesses have always traditionally been, again, the source of our economic lifeblood and vitality. So those are a couple of things. I can go into the topic of criminal justice. I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. Education, the disparities there. You look at the fact that our children are supposed to be learning from home right now, but in poor communities, in Black and brown communities, urban communities as well as rural communities, access to broadband is a real issue. I know it's a real issue here in North Carolina. We're talking about how our children should be learning from home. But first of all, that requires that you have affordable access to broadband if you have access at all. Then, if you have more than one child, do you have access to the technology? Are you going to have that many laptops? So many of our families who have access to Wi-Fi, it's on their cell phone. A child can't learn remotely on a cell phone. These are real issues that will have long-term impact on our communities if we don't see it and address it. And that's part of the plan we have. So I appreciate your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Harris. And again, just your answer to that, being a middle school teacher at a Title I school, definitely a lot of the points that you have made are definitely spot on, especially about mental health, which is so important in the African American community. We want to turn it over now to our next question, Mr. LaVarn Barnes.
Good evening and welcome back to North Carolina.
Thank you.
And as a proud public school teacher in Durham Public Schools, I got to shout out the School for Creative Studies before I get in trouble.
Yeah.
My question to you is, how will the Biden-Harris ticket propel young men to be able to have a seat at the table of leadership? So that's my question.
All right. So, first of all, it requires that you see young men and see in young men leaders. I find myself, it was actually after the Breonna Taylor grand jury decision that came down last week, I was reminded of one of the many sayings that my late mother had. And one of them is she would say to me, Kamala, don't you ever let anybody tell you who you are. You tell them who you are. So when I say that to you, I'm not suggesting I will tell you you are a young leader and until I anoint you young leader, you are. You're already a young leader. And I'm talking about the fact that I recognize that and I see that and I honor that. It means then creating not only access, but an open door with constant access so that your role of leadership can inform the decisions that I make and that we make. So that's about being not only able to walk through the door, but having a seat at the table. On issues, again, like what we were talking about around access to capital. You are both teachers. Title I funding. Joe and I have a part of our plan for Title I funding is that we will triple Title I funding. And for everybody knows Title I funding is about funding that goes to inner city schools, to schools that have low tax base, cities that have schools that have the highest rates of need. It's about what we need to do in terms of leadership on issues that are about education. Not only K through 12, which you are both leaders as educators, but also what we need to do around creating access to employment opportunities based on providing the education that is necessary to have those kinds of jobs. The way I think about it is we got to stop talking just about higher education. I like to say instead, let's think about it as education after high school and making sure that there are paths that are available for education after high school, because the good jobs, most of them as we go forward, are going to require education after high school. And for some, investing in so many of our HBCUs that have research components, right? Because we want to have a presence when we're talking about researching and figuring out how we're going to develop things like AI. You know what AI is? Artificial intelligence. You know, the other way you can think of it is machine learning. Let's break that down for a minute because it's so important. Machine learning. Machine learning, the educators know that often what you learn is a function of who's teaching you. So the machine is going to learn based on who's teaching it. We need to make sure everyone is present in teaching the machine how it makes decisions about who does what and who can do what. Investing in HBCUs around things like research and development, it'll have a profound impact. So these are some of the ways that we think about it that are about the criminal justice system, but it is also about the investment that we need to make in healthy communities. I talked about home ownership. Again, North Carolina, you know the history of redlining, the history of folks being denied access even when they built up and saved the capital to being able to buy in neighborhoods where they would appreciate the value of their home. We're talking about a $15,000 tax credit, and this is again for young leaders, a $15,000 tax credit for new homeowners to help for down payments and closing costs. Because especially for us, and for most Americans, home ownership is their greatest source of wealth and intergenerational wealth, right? But we need to give people a leg up on being able to actually just close on that place to develop that intergenerational wealth. So those are some of the things. And I appreciate your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Harris. At this time, Lori Jones.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming out to North Carolina again. My question for you is, what resources will be made available for small Black-owned businesses and for startup businesses, especially in the light of challenges faced in the recovery time from the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So that's about the $150 billion going for low-interest loans as well as for capital for reinvestment. There's also a big part of what we're doing that's about basically helping people start back up. So small businesses, to your point, who have, you know, I've seen numbers that as many as 50% or half of Black-owned businesses during the course of this pandemic have suffered to the point of shutting down. And the concern I have there is to shut down and never to reopen. So there's a big part of the plan that Joe and I have that's about helping people restart. So that's about rehiring and building back up also with, I mean, here, the White family will probably appreciate this, helping businesses have the capital to restart in a way that they can also get the grant funding to do things like build plexiglass barriers in their businesses, right? To equip their workforce with the PPEs, because otherwise that's extra money out of their pocket, not to mention what we need to do for our teachers to give them that extra support and our frontline workers. But those kinds of things. In the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, not to be confused with PPE, which is the personal protective equipment, for the PPP plan, the last numbers I saw, 90% of Black, minority, women-owned businesses did not get the benefit of it, right? So another component of our plan is also about reinforcing and strengthening community banks, right? So CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions. So they have more assets because what we know is that when our entrepreneurs decide they want to open a business and go get a loan, it's the community bank that will know them, know the culture of the community, and also give the kind of the assistance an entrepreneur needs to run a business. Because if we're just relying on the big banks to do that, that's not going to happen. So that's a component of our plan as well, which is to reinforce and put more resources into the CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions, because they're the ones on the ground, so that our businesses have real access in a way that is culturally competent. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, Senator Harris, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to answer our questions this afternoon. So for our last question, I'd like to ask Ms. Robin Sanders to give the remaining question for this afternoon.
I'm going to take off my mask. Hi, Senator Harris. My name is Robin Sanders. I'm here with my twin sister, Ashlyn. I'm in my last year of law school right now, and I'll be clerking when I finish, and I will one day run for public office. And I'm honored to vote for you in this election. I'm deeply troubled by the state of our nation, specifically with respect to the law and the criminal justice system, as has been stated here today. There have been ceaseless murders and executions of Black Americans on video. And the most recent travesty in my mind is the Breonna Taylor murder. And my question involves accountability and equal protection, because as I watched Daniel Cameron deliver his press conference, I couldn't help but be disturbed by the perversion of the law. He stated that the Constitution affords equal protection to all citizens, but yet in the same breath urged that Breonna Taylor would not receive justice, even though the law was clearly broken in that case. So my question is, what are the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration to not only demonstrate that, there's a real need for policy change, but what about the accountability piece and the equal protection piece? Because Black Americans deserve equal protection under the law and due process. So that's my question.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And you must run for office. Just first get through law school, pass the bar.
Yeah.
And thank you to you and your sister both. I couldn't agree with you more. Here's how I think and talk about it. There's a phrase that's used often in the criminal justice system, which is there needs to be accountability and consequence. Accountability and consequence. And that phrase is almost entirely and totally and only used in connection with the person arrested, and not in connection with the system itself and the actors and players within the system. And that's part of what is broken and unjust about the system. So to your point on the accountability and consequence piece, if we are going to be true to those words, we just honored the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, equal justice under law. She who follows in the path, one of my personal heroes, Thurgood Marshall, equal justice under the law. The fight that we are continually waging, which we will one day win, especially when you become a lawyer. We have to agree that there has been a failure to have equal application of accountability and consequence in the criminal justice system. So that's why, as we were discussing earlier, we have in our plan those things that are going to be about accountability and consequence. On the case of Breonna Taylor, it was a gut punch for all of us to hear that. I've talked to Mika Palmer, her mother, starting months ago and most recently just a couple of days ago. And what I said is what we started to talk about, that Breonna Taylor's life, we will never allow other people to measure. We know the measure of her life and the value of her life. But we still have to fight for the system to recognize, as we often and always say, Black Lives Matter. I have said many times in many speeches and many situations, America has yet to value the sanctity of Black life and has yet to treat Black life as fully human. And her case couldn't be a more recent example of that. So accountability and consequence needs to happen. What would we do? So it's everything that I talked about earlier. And as a former attorney general, I was elected as only the second black woman, I think, in the history of our country to be elected an attorney general of any state. I created, when I was attorney general, I actually implemented pattern and practice investigations of law enforcement agencies. Joe and I have a commitment to doing that, which is that the United States Department of Justice, under our leadership, will have the responsibility for seriously engaging in pattern and practice investigations, putting resources into not only the pattern and practice of discrimination, of excessive force, but also putting resources into the consent decrees, right? So after a court has found that there is a problem, there usually is a responsibility to fix it. But if you're not supervising that, that's called the consent decree, it's likely to not happen. The other thing we're going to do is not only, as has been done in the distant past, which is to have pattern practice investigations of law enforcement agencies, that's going to include prosecutors' offices, because that needs to happen also. In addition, I do believe that in the Breonna Taylor case, there needs to be a civil rights investigation of what they did by the United States Department of Justice. And we're just going to have to keep fighting, and we're going to keep saying her name. But we say her name not just to speak her name, we say her name to motivate action. And that's what's most important.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Senator Harris, for coming to the great Tar Heel state of North Carolina. And a lot of the issues that we touched today, my grandmother has a saying, real change is hard change, but it's necessary change. That's right. And that is the epitome of the campaign that we see. And so we're just so thankful. And we want to turn it over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, I'm just honored to be with so many leaders. I appreciate the candid and the direct conversation we've had. I hope to have many more. There's so much to get done. There's so much to get done. And we can get it done. I do believe that. But everything that we've talked about and so much more is at stake in this election. I mean, not to mention, the man paid $750. Come on now. On top of all of that, adding insult to injury. But there's so much at stake. And when I think about all of our leaders of every generation, I'm here to ask you for your help. Joe and I need your help. I guess my final point would be about voting. The brother here has his vote 2020 mask on. You know, North Carolina has a specific and a particular history with this issue that has been going on since the ancestors were fighting. Shaw, right? Southern Christian Leadership, all the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which John Lewis led and shed his blood on that Edmund Pettus Bridge. In fact, that was the last big public event I attended before the pandemic, was to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis. So there is the historical piece of this, of all of those who marched and died and shed their blood. There is the piece of it that is about what happened in 2013 when the United States Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act with Shelby v. Holder. And as you in North Carolina know, legislatures then, and in North Carolina's case with surgical precision, passed laws to prevent and to make it difficult for black people to vote. So we've got the reason to vote, which is to honor the ancestors like John Lewis. We've got the reason to vote, which is knowing that there are people who are putting so many powerful obstacles in our way when we have so much at stake. And then here's the other piece that I would just add to close out our thoughts. You got to sit back at some point and ask, why are so many powerful people trying to stand in our way to vote? Like, why? Why are they trying to make it difficult? Why are they trying to confuse people? Why are they trying to suppress the black vote? And here's the answer, I believe. Because they know when we vote, things change. They know when we vote, things get better. And they're scared of that. And so I say, let us not ever let anybody take our power. Not now, not ever. Let us not let anyone stand in the way of the power of our vote. No matter how difficult they are trying, and they are trying. So let's make sure everybody in North Carolina votes early. Early voting starts Thursday, October 15th. Let's let our voices be heard. Yes, in the name of the ancestors. Yes, because there is so much at stake. And yes, because we're not letting anybody messing with our power. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're going to take individual photos. So at this time, you will be seated. We'll call you out one by one. We'll make sure that we stay socially distanced from the senator as we begin the photo line. She will be socially distanced from you. Right, she will be socially distanced for you as well. And so we're going to start with our moderators since they're right here up front. Please keep your mask on. Also, no personal phones. We will send you your photos.
Did we cut the lights?
Hey guys. No. I'm just gonna upload the things. Thank you. I hope it met your expectations.